Technically speaking, I ain't talking vegan when I said that I've been eating, making money on the side, but I use it for the
Fine.
Sweet. So what are we doing tonight?
All right. So tonight we are really just learning how to add a device in Call Manager from new. Basically going through what we call the IP phone boot up process. Let me bring it up here. Uh, Let me just make sure. Okay. So basically, like I said, IP phone boot up, it's just when we decide to add a phone into our network and the user wants to use a desk phone. For example, a receptionist or the security desk, they have an actual phone, a hardware device, and a Cisco phone. And that phone, can make and receive calls based on the calling restrictions and all that stuff that the company allows. And all that back end, all that configuring is done by us, the voice network engineers. And we take that phone, the MAC address, and we add it into our server, which is the call manager server, and we make sure that it can, start making and receiving calls based on the settings that we allow. And when I say settings that we allow or restrictions, again, based off of like a receptionist or the security desk, they may not be able to dial out to Pizza Hut, but they can dial to the fourth floor of the building, or they can dial out to 911. Or maybe they can dial to Pizza Hut or, somewhere to get food, but they cannot make international calls or they cannot make probably long distance calls, right? These are the restrictions that we would place the engineer, the voice network engineer. So I'm just going to show you guys at least the first part because setting up a phone is more than just this IP phone boot up process. There's a lot that go into it, but that will take, hours. So really, I just wanted to create some type of visual, which you can see as we, set up devices in our world, in our voice network world. I just wanted to make sure. So I have basically a lab set up. As you can see here, this lab is, an instance of Call Manager, our server. Now, just to back it up a little bit, I wanted to bring up a document of the history really quick because I know some of you guys really need the history of this call manager server and when we say call manager, what does that mean and all these other things. So let's excuse me, let's actually go into it. Let me make sure I have not the updated. Okay, cool. We'll go through this. Now, sorry, guys. Now, when I say call manager, this is where our calls, this is like the central house of where our calls are processed. And that's where they go before they go inbound and outbound. They go to your phone, out from your phone. And whichever process, whichever call you're on the receiving end or not, it is going to go through this call manager. Now, like we said, going back in history, we have something called plain old telephone system. We call it POTS. And this POTS is basically just literally a phone. Think of like a rotary phone or think of like a landline phone. That phone is going to be connected into a jack into the wall. That jack into the wall has wires in it that goes down into the ground and all type of other stuff. But those wires go in connect to an exchange. That exchange back in the day is literally exchanging, your calls. It's like a human. We'll go back to how it started. We have the human who will literally have a switchboard and will switch these different calls, right? And the calls will go to the user, well, to who you're calling. Now, that's one-on-one. That's just a landline calling to another landline, for instance. But when we talk about a business has multiple of these users going to a telephone exchange. So instead of having all of these wires going to a centralized exchange, the company can say, hey, I can manage my own telephones. I don't need the exchange, all these phone calls to go to, AT&T. I want to manage my phone calls. Again, I'm in a business. Let's say I started a collection agency and I have about 20 agents and they're just calling. They're like, hey, you owe debt. They're trying to collect debt, right? So instead of, I want to, they're calling, they need a voice plan for the phones, to be able to call out. Instead of literally having a landline for all 20 agents, I can say, hey, I'm going to manage all of the calls here in-house for my agents at the collection agency. And that's what we call a PBX, a private branch exchange. Now, this is, again, the company is becoming, for instance, AT&T, like a little mini AT&T. They have their own PBX, own private branch exchange, their own call processing house where they manage all the calls. And they say, hey, this is the restrictions, this is, all the configs, all whoopty whoopty, whatever. So they have this actual real big device, and they will switch their own phone calls. So they'll have the IT team come in and switch these calls on this PBX. This PBX will go to what we call a PSTN. And this PSTN, which is a public switch telephone network, and it's basically our cloud. It's like, our internet cloud. When you call, when you're, trying to send a text message or not even a text message, but when you're trying to go to Facebook or something or surf the web, right? Your data is being transmitted over the internet. That cloud, what we call, is the internet. But on the telephone side, on the voice network side, our cloud is called a PSTN, right? It's the telephone network that everyone uses to switch telephone calls, right? Now, as technology start getting advanced and we start switching over to a digital world, now our PBX became something instead of physical and hardware, but something more virtual, right? So something more in the cloud. So when you say, hey, our data's in the cloud, or just send it to the cloud, we decided to, well, they, not we, they decided to create this IP PBX. And this IP PBX is, Internet Protocol. That's what IP stands for. And it's Internet Protocol based, the private exchange branch. So now it becomes a server, a small piece of hardware that can be virtualized into a calling processing nodes, call managing nodes. Okay. And that's what we call our call manager. So what we will do is we'll have something like this, something like a small server. And that server, we will, create a virtual machine. That virtual machine will be called, we'll create that virtual machine. And on that virtual machine, we will configure our PBX. Our PBX nowadays is called a call manager. Well, it's called Cisco Unified Communications Manager is the correct term, CUCM. But that's the new name. We we just call it regular call manager. That's just something that's across the board. You may see the UC or CUCM. So many different little ways you will hear it, but most of the time you'll just hear call manager. So call manager is a virtual machine. It's not real. You cannot touch it. You can touch the server that call manager lives on, but most of the time that server it's tucked away in a data center somewhere in another state. Okay, and we access that remotely. A lot of our configurations and everything that we do is done remotely. That's why it's great to be in this type of field, this type of department, because you're able to always get away with working remote. Because with call manager we really don't touch any devices. We will touch the phones if possible, but that's usually on a network admin, network technician type role. But we're engineers over here, so we just configure. So that's what the Cisco call manager, as you can see, CUCM. Um, like I said, most of the time we just call it Cisco call manager or call manager. And it lives on this server. Now, I don't want to get too technical in it. I'm just going to look through just to see if we need to uncover anything really. Not really, but I definitely wanted to show you guys how something that is like a regular day-to-day thing that we would do um, as a, voice network engineer. Now, for starters, the role, the title, the job title, if you're working in this type of department, will be Unified Communications and Collaborations Engineer. You may just get Unified Communications Engineer. You may get a Voice Engineer, sometimes Voice Network Engineer. Uh, but most of the time, your title will always be Unified Communications and Collaborations Engineer. Why? Because Call Manager and Cisco itself has decided to put voice and video together. So we deal with communication and the collaboration of all of that communication, which involves instant messages, which involves videos and meetings, just like we're having a Zoom. Cisco has their own thing called WebEx, where they host meetings. So you have to be able to, know the back end of not only just voice and audio, but video as well. And those things that come along with voice and video, like instant messaging and other things as such. So yeah, so you'll most likely won't have like voice or VoIP engineer. It'll mostly be unified communications in some sense. Okay, so you get this title, and most of the day-to-day task is, um, random things that have to deal with your phone. Let me go back to IP phone boot up. A user's phone. So a user has a computer, and their computer is connected to their phone, or their phone probably just connected straight into the jack on the wall. Some issues that they have with calling restrictions, whatever the case may be. But a very regular thing that we get, and a very basic thing that we get, is adding a new user. Let's say someone got hired into the company, they came in, they got their desk, they have their computer, and they have their Cisco phone at their desk. Now, what we have to do is configure the Cisco phone so the user can start doing their job, whether they're in sales and they have to make sales call, whether they're part of a call center, so they have to answer inbound calls, whatever the case may be. If you have a phone at your desk and you need to use it for business purposes, I am here to configure that. Okay, we are here to configure that. So the first things first, you get a ticket in multiple different type of ticketing platforms, but you'll get your ticket and they'll say, hey, user Suzanne has, is a new hire, and she has, she's being assigned to this desk, right? This desk has this phone, or maybe it don't have a phone. I don't know, but she needs a phone for business purposes. What my job is to collect information first. So as you can see, I made a little diagram, and the first thing I'm going to do as the administrator, as the engineer, is I'm going to collect this information. So I need to configure the phone in Call Manager. I need to collect the MAC address. The MAC address is the address that of the physical device. Okay, we have MAC addresses and IP addresses. MAC address is the physical address. Where do you find that? On the box of the phone or right on the back of the phone. This phone right here, you just turn it over and it'll have the MAC address there. The technician will usually just send me that MAC address, or if, maybe it's on an Excel spreadsheet, or maybe I work in the office and the box is there or the phone is there, I can just go get it, Regardless, I need to obtain the MAC address of this phone. The next thing is the device pool. Most of the time, the device pool is already there, but sometimes we have to create it. And that's what we're going to go through today is creating this device pool amongst other settings. But these two are the main things you want to worry about. Okay. So boom, we have the MAC address. Actually, let's go into admin settings and duties. And I want to show you guys the MAC address here. Okay. So MAC address, you see, it's these devices. They're old that I'm showing you. They Cisco do have updated IP phones. I think like the 88 series or something like that. But they have updated phones. But as you can see, this is kind of like a tried and true Cisco phone that you may see in like the movies or one of a TV show. I know they showed it a lot in The Office. If you guys watch that, you'll see these phones on every one of their desks. So think of, think of that. Think of that show, The Office, and they have these phones at their desk. And I am the voice engineer, or you are the voice engineer. We are the voice engineer to make sure that they can make and receive calls from this phone. Okay. So, like I said, it is on the packaging of the box. You can do it on the back of the phone, or you can just look within the phone and there are the device settings. But like I said, the easiest is just flipping it over and seeing that. Okay. Now we have a fake Mac right here. Let's go ahead and get it. Device pool. Like I said, we definitely need that. What is a device pool? It's just common settings for a group of devices for a specific location. So for example, if I worked at a company and we had multiple offices in multiple states, I would create those device pools for each state. So I'll have a device pool for Georgia. I'll have a device pool for Minnesota. I have a device pool for California. Or let's say we have multiple offices in the same state, just different cities. So I would have, a device pool for Houston if we're in Texas. I would have a device pool for Dallas. I would have a device pool for Austin. I would have a device pool for San Antonio. We can get even more granular. Let's say that we have different offices on different sides of towns, maybe different streets. I have a device pool, for example, on Peachtree Road. I'll have a device pool on McKinley Avenue. Like you can
Mhm.
get really granular with these device pools. Um,
I have a
but
question.
yes, yes.
So I want to make sure I understand the reason for device pools. Is the reason because within a particular device pool, you may have phones that are not permitted to call outside of that device pool? Is that why?
You can say that, yes. But more when you say calling,
Hmm.
when you kind of said that, it kind of remind me of like CSS and partitions, like restrictions on who you can call and who can call you.
Yeah, that's why.
Um,
Hmm.
yeah. Device pool is more like all the devices that are in a specific location grouped together. So we can go like, for example, this first one, date and time group. So we may have a call manager, a server that house different states, offices in different states. So one device group may be for Georgia and Minnesota, or I would say Georgia and Ohio or Virginia, and that's because it's on the East Coast time zone. And then I could have a device pool for the Central time zone, which will be Texas and I don't know, Minnesota or something. And then I could have a device pool for the Pacific group, which is California and Oregon, right? Because I wouldn't want a phone that's in our California office to be in the device pool that's for, Eastern time zone, that's over here with the Virginia phone, you know. I would want them to, get
Oh,
the correct date and time format.
okay. So it's more of a management tool.
Yeah, definitely. Management tool and Yeah, you could say management tool, but more of for the calls because of the device pool. Not only does it have date and time group, it also
Mhm.
has things like location and regions, which is allocating bandwidth for the calls and the videos. So it's also giving those configurations to the phone, to the call itself that's happening, and saying like, hey, this is, how you traverse through the network. You only talk with this type of codec. You only use, this much of bandwidth. Or if your if something goes wrong with the gateway, here is a alternative way to send a call out, right? Or here is the music that you would listen to when it's time for a conference call. Because, one conference call or one, music, yeah, maybe it's a conference call or on hold music or whatever, it may have a different greeting than another office, so to keep those configurations organized, we organize them in device pools because these group of devices get this group of settings, right? They get, this is how much they can use bandwidth when they make a call or when they, do a video. Like I said, this is, where you go if the router goes down, if the gateway goes down. Um, more settings, but this is essentially uh for a group of device in that location using specific settings. Like I said, that's why I say it can get real granular to just the building or the floor on the building per device pool, or it can just be really broad, like, hey, this is California's device pool, this is Colorado's device pool, you know. And it all depends on the business needs. The business may not have a whole bunch of intricate stuff like that to where certain devices take certain media for their music on hold or certain bandwidth is usually, the same per state or the same per whatever, however far they're going is usually the same. What I've came in contact with is more like uh more just their sites itself, their own office. So each device pool will always be an office itself. So that office can either be down the street or their office can be in a whole another state. It doesn't matter. Each device pool means that it's a specific office. Um, so I can have I can have two device pools that kind of have the same information in it, right? What's different is the the phones that the device pool, has registered to it, which will only be to a specific site. And again, that's just organizing. We're just trying to organize our phones. We're trying to organize our users and who belongs where. So if anything happens, we can kind of pinpoint like, okay, this is a site issue, not a region issue or not something wrong with our servers. Um, and if it's a site issue, is it specific to a different service provider? Because we'll have two different service providers that will provide service to us. We'll have AT&T for one and then Verizon for another. So if this site is having issues and they're the only one that's using AT&T and everyone else is using Verizon and they're good, we might look at our service provider and be like, "Hey, we're having issues at our site. Is it you?" That'll be one of our troubleshooting steps. Um, but yeah, device pool, just look at it as like, hey, this is where a group of devices belong, you know. So if you see a device pool and they may say device pool one, device pool two, device pool three, just know that device pool one may be an office one, device pool two may be an office two. Kind of just look at it like um kind of broad like that until you get into the company and see what they have going on. Now, if you're the architect, if you're setting these things up, like what we will do is set up this device pool, then we can kind of set it up kind of how we want in a sense. But that's coming onto a project where, they're spinning up a server brand new, which is rare, but it can happen. Now, setting up a device pool, let me just make sure I got the log. Oh, I don't need to log in. So setting up a device pool, what we would want to do is we would want to come in and we would want to, well, first, let's actually go to device. So when you get a ticket, add a phone, yada, 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 you go through it. The first thing you want to do is come here, device, phone, click on phone. And you can say fine if you want to look at other phones and maybe make a copy of it, but you would definitely want to start and say add new. Now, this is a manual process. Um, this manual process, usually we do it called a bat with a bat tool. This bat tool it's a bulk upload, so it uploads these things automatically for us. We don't have to go through each config. But most of the cases you have these one-offs. That's why it's like something, basic you should be able to do. And this is how, you do these one-offs, this manual thing. So you come in, phone type, and you would, select the phone. Now, the Mac of the phone will tell you what phone type it is. Again, it's on the box, it's on the phone itself, but you need to find whatever it is. I don't know what this Mac is. We can just take a guess, but let's say it's a Cisco 7911. That's pretty common out there. So we do next and select the device protocol. This device protocol is saying what protocol would you like to use to register your phone to this call manager. Now let's go up here. Let's go back. Let's go back to device pool. Let's go back. Let me see. I want to go back so you guys can see basically where we have. Hold on. Sorry, guys. Let me get you back up here. Where's copy link? All right. I want you guys to see the diagram here. All right, so we have our user phone, excuse me. Where we at? We have our user phone, and our user phone is going to go through some networking stuff, which is our switch and our router. But in all, our phone is going to register at the end to our call manager. Okay, that call manager, how it registers is going to use a protocol. What protocol is that? As you can see, I put a number 7 here because that's the last thing the phone will do is try to register to this server. So in 7, it says it's going to register with SIP or SCCP, which we call skinny. Okay, let me see. Let me go down here. Let me see if it gives y'all some information. So SIP or skinny, and don't tell you too much here, so we ain't gonna go too much. So let's go in. So SIP or skinny, skinny is Cisco proprietary. So that means that it only can be used on Cisco devices. So if you had another product type that was not a Cisco device, then you could not use this protocol. It is, again, Cisco proprietary. SIP is open source. It can be used on any phone, Cisco, non-Cisco, to register to our call manager. So you can use by default, skinny if you like, especially if you have a Cisco device, or you can keep it simple and use SIP. Again, SIP is open source, and I mean, why not? So let's go ahead and use SIP. Now, it will come up to this page and you'll have to put in some information. Really, you'll just want to make sure that the asterisk, everything with an asterisk it doesn't say none. It has something in it, even if it's just default. We don't usually change all of this stuff. So what we'll do is we'll come in, add our MAC. Maybe not that. We'll add our MAC. Let's get our MAC address. This MAC address will be in the ticket. If it's not in the ticket, then you would contact a technician, local IT, somebody who has boots on the ground. If you have boots on the ground, then you need to go and find the MAC of that phone. All right, so we have our MAC address. We put it in here, our description. If you click out, it will automatically put in this as the description, which is the MAC address with the beginning SCP, which happens by default. If you want, you can change it to keep your configurations understandable and readable in case you get fired or you quit. You would want to put a description here. So let's say we're putting a phone for I don't know, let's do Susan White, right? And we're gonna say Susan White is at the front desk. Okay, something simple. You can, most of the time, you're coming into an already built environment, so they will tell you, I mean, you'll see what the scheme is as far as what the description should be and the naming scheme, all that other stuff. But if you're setting it up how you want or they just don't care, just make it something of, you know, that makes sense of what you're putting in. What type of device? What is this device for? It's for the ticket says it's for front desk, Susan White. She's going to answer it, right? Or maybe it's just front desk. Let's just do that. Let's just say it's just front desk, you know? Now here we go. We got the device pool. Now we're going to create a device pool, but they always have a default. So go ahead, you can select defaults, only one we have. But like I said, we will recreate it. The phone button template. That's basically saying the buttons on the phone, what is the template? When you press 3, where does that go? Or when you press the mute button or the conference button or the transfer button, you know, all these little buttons. So we want to make sure that we put that in. Most of the time, it's going to give you your device type. Cisco has that pre-built, so that's good there. You just select it. Now we have, again, we're just paying attention to the asterisks. We have our common phone profile. That's usually already there. Standard common phone profile. You can definitely create, you know, customize it, but in environments I've been in, we usually don't customize too much. Calling search space. This is very important. You definitely want to have one, but we don't have any configured and it doesn't have an asterisk to you know, save it. But it is important when it's time to make and receive calls. But we're not there. We're just adding in the device. Another thing is location. Location is basically dealing with your bandwidth per your calls. So we can select what we're going to select. We didn't create any. We could just create hub none. Hub none is usually a default for stuff, at least for location. Let's go in to built-in bridge default. We keep that default. I keep that default. I've never really changed built-in bridge or privacy. The owner. Now, the owner can be a user. Usually it is a user. We did put Susan White or something as the user, but what we can do is actually do anonymous. Anonymous is usually when it's shared, just like we're doing front desk and such. It's usually shared. So let's just do anonymous. And it's not doesn't have an asterisk, but it's still important as you start to want to make calls and receive calls. Uh, Phone personalization, just default. I keep services provisioning default. We usually don't change it. I don't really know too much of what's going on with this one. Um, use trusted relay point. Again, default, always use prime line, default. I don't know what that is, but we don't change that. I don't change it. In my 3, 4 years, I haven't changed any of this. Um, let's see. I keep the defaults checked. Allow controller device from CTI. Logged into Hunt group. That's that Hunt group button. Maybe or maybe not. They will be part of one. Again, I'm not changing any of this. Um, packet capture mode that has an asterisk none. Let's just keep that as that. It doesn't have this type of none, so we're okay to keep that. This presence group, we're going to keep it. Usually has the same device security profile. This is one that usually trips me up all the time because I just end up keeping all the defaults and save and realizing that this is the main one that needs to be changed. So with the device security profile, it's just doing exactly what it says. It's giving the security to the device. And usually we just choose what's pre-built for this phone. As you can see, Cisco 7911, standard SIP, non-secure profile. We just click that. SIP profile right here. Let's go ahead and say what SIP profile. I usually select standard SIP profile. Sometimes in environments, they will have something different that they want you to choose based off the routing logic. And again, that's for the other engineers to tell you, the architect to tell you as you come into their environment. Or again, you're part of the team that actually creating the routing logic. So you already know what SIP profile to use. Um, but you'll just, select standard. And then most of this is blah, 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 blah. We're not, like I said, I usually just don't care too much, keep all the defaults. This will always come up. Click on the apply config button to have changes taken to effect. So just because you saved it, don't mean that, the changes are in effect. So you actually have to come up here. Well, as you can see, we have a new screen, right? But you come up here to apply config, click on apply. It'll tell you a little stuff basically saying that once you click apply config, the phone will do a reboot. It will turn off, turn back on, so the configurations can take effect. And you click OK. It'll probably take like no more than 60 seconds, right? It's really quick. And it will come back on and it will supposed to register. This registration says unknown because we haven't really set up a lot. However, if everything is pre-built for you, this is really step one and it should register to some point. The next step, what you have to do is you have to add a new DN. DN stands for directory number. So yeah, the phone is great. The phone registered to call manager. Nice. But how do you make it receive calls? You do need a phone number. So you go into line 1, add a new DN. Where do you get this phone number? Now, as an engineer, they will give you an Excel list or list wherever it's located in that company's environment. But what I've witnessed is it's always an Excel spreadsheet and it has a list of available DIDs, which is direct inward dials. It's nothing but directory numbers that are available that the company pays for and we are able to use as long as it's not assigned to anybody else in the company. Usually we keep a track of all of that, whether it be you, whether it be somebody on the team, whether it's automated system, I don't know. But that list is there and you pick from it and boom, right? So you pick an available directory number and you add it. So you can add something, let's say the number is a 404-797-8899, right? Let's say that's an available number. Sometimes, depending on the number scheme, you may have to, maybe add a 9 in front of it or maybe add a 1 in front of it. But we're not going to go that far. We're just going to add a regular number, okay? So I add a regular number and I have to select a partition. What is a partition? A partition is basically saying who can call you? No, who can you call? Who can this number call to? Can they do long distance? Can they do um, local, whatever the case is. Uh, Most of the time you have a set partition, but we don't have anything here. We will add something, but let's just say E164, right? E164 just stands for the North American numbering pattern, right? In North America, what do we use? We use the country code. We have our 3 digits 404, and then we got our local 797, and then we have our phone number, right? 8899. So back in the day, I don't know how old everyone is, but you was able to pick up your landline and dial 8899. And then technology started advancing and you had to dial 797 8899. And then technology kept advancing and now you have to just dial the whole 10-digit number, right? There's no you just dialing 7 digits. All right. And some, depending on who you're calling, where you're calling, you have to put the one in front or the country code, right? If you're calling to Mexico or something. So E164 just means, our numbering pattern, our area code and the 7-digit number. Okay, that's really all it means in a whole bunch of words if you look it up. But we're just gonna save that, and once we save it, let's just say, everything was pre-built. We'll have the user or the technician probably power the phone off, power the phone on, or make a test call. Let me know. Can you make and receive calls on that line? And yes or no, right? We can do apply config. Let's go back. And we're going here, as you can see, and we can go back up here. Now, that's another thing I want to show you guys really quick. Now, you see we have our phone that we added. It has all of these things. But before we go into it, if you click into the phone, let's click into the directory line. You always want to go back to the previous screen with this button. Go on the top right. You see configure device. You can go back. You can go back to the find list. You can go back to some records. You go back to where we configure the device because we're on the configuring the line. Always do this. Never do the back button. See this back button, browser back button? Don't do that. Okay? When you go back, oh, it didn't. Usually when you go back, and this is probably because it's a lab environment, but in production, it will just take you all the way out to where you have to sign back in again. Let me go back. Okay, yeah, this didn't do it, but this is because this is a lab environment. Most of the time in production, you cannot use this back button. It is terrible. It takes you all the way out. And I've learned that the hard way. So please make sure you make that a note. But we are back at our find list of phones, and we see we added our 7911, and you see our MAC here. You see our description. We're part of the default device pool, SIP. It says never. It was never registered to this call manager. What makes sense? This is a lab environment. But usually you'll see some things to where, it show where it last registered and what call manager and all that good stuff. But again, we're not going to go too far. We're going to go into creating a device pool. So when you come to system over here on the left and you go down to device pool, you're able to see what device pools are already configured and if you have to configure one or you can just use one that's already pre-configured and looks good. So you click on the find button to find, see what's all configured. Obviously, it's only the default. This is just a lab environment, but you may see a bunch of different device pools. And if the front desk person is in the Georgia device pool or is in Georgia and you see a device pool called Georgia or GA or whatever, you might be able to use it. You might could just say, hey, I'm just gonna select, device pool GA instead of default. And you can always verify with your teammates. Like, there's really no wrong answer. Um, there's really no wrong question. Is what I'm gonna say. Like, you can ask anything. Hey, I'm not really sure what device pool to add this user. Should it be device pool Georgia, or did you want me to create a new one? Like, it's totally fine to say these things. It's just, can you do it? I can tell you, like, no, just assign it to the same or create a new one. That's nothing. But if I have to take out time to walk you through on how to create a device pool or where to go to find the device pools, then that becomes a problem, right? And we don't want to be a problem. We want to solve problems. So in the device pools, let's go ahead and add new. Well, what we may have to do is add some more configs before we do create this full device pool. Because here we have the date and time group, right? We have region. As you can see, we only have our defaults. So let's go ahead and come into and let's start off with region, right? We have region information. Let's go down to region. We can say fine. We can see it will always be a default, but let's go ahead and add new, right? We can call this region, let's say we are setting up different in different states. So let's call it TX region. Okay, something simple. Keep the naming simple. Okay. So with our regions, we can say, for example, now we'll have system defaults already displayed, whatever call manager default is, which is some codec G711 or something, 722. I don't know. We're not going to get into codecs too much. But with your regions, you can come in here, change the settings how you want, configure however you need. So let's say I wanted to, you know, spice it up. I don't want to use the system defaults. I'll say, hey, I'm going to do my Texas region, and let me go, oops, let's say our Kodak is, our preference list. This is, again, something that we would want to do, something that maybe our manager told us to do. It's nothing that you're just making off at the top of your head. You're doing this for a routing reason. And again, you're probably, let's say you're 3-4 months in the company. If you're not hired on as like, senior or architect, they're going to tell you what to put. Okay. So let's say we're going to use system default. We're going to have, 384 kilobits per second. Let's say use system default and use system default. Again, where you can create it how you need to create it. So as you change your region settings, as you can see, it will show you, what you have going on here. And you can update it as you want. Why would you change regions? What's going on with regions? Regions is literally your the max amount of bandwidth you can use per your call or per your video call, right? Why are we allocating bandwidth? Because bandwidth is not free. We have to pay for that. Well, the company has to pay for that, just like when you get a cell phone and you say, hey, I have my Apple phone, but I want to call people outside of using my Apple ID. What do you have to do? You have to get a phone plan. Most of the time, it's unlimited voice video data. So we don't care. We pay the $79.99 a month and keep it pushing, right? But if you are landline, you may pay for X amount of calls or X amount of data that you can use on your computer. I mean, we go to that. It's not really unlimited. They slow it down after you use so much data, after you use so much bandwidth, you know? So if you are accumulating all this data, which is equal to this speed, they're going to limit you. And we're doing the same thing in big companies. Like, we're going to get limit. So we're going to pay for X amount of bandwidth, X amount of speed, you know? And that gets allocated to our calls and our videos and such. Um, so we don't just, there's no unlimited plans on this end, right? So we have to do these things like regions to ensure that we're not just paying billions of dollars in phone service. And that's a conversation that you'll probably be in when you're talking to the architect, senior engineers, or just being in the meetings when you're talking to the ISP, the internet service provider, um, or the provider, period, the telephone provider, because they'll definitely let you know, like, hey, your bill this month was $52,693.17. And you will look like, wow. And they'll be like, oh, that's pretty good. Because last month it was 152,000, right? So these things are important. So we have our region. We set that up. Let's set up, let's see, what do we have? We have a date and time group. We can set that up. We can do find, and you see there's only so much, so we're going to add new. And this group can be called the Texas Central, maybe. I don't know. And then you would look for the Central Time or whatever time frame this these devices in this device pool will be in. And I think I passed it. Where was we? We was Central. I don't know where it's at. But while I'm looking for that, if anybody have any questions, you guys are welcome to unmute and ask. Oh, here we go. Unmute and ask if you want. Uh, Hold on.
Right now, this is a day in the life of setting up a new employee's phone, IP phone.
That is correct. Adding a IP phone to the system because we got a new hire or someone just needed a phone. Maybe they didn't have a phone before. Oh, here we go. No, that's not it. Maybe they didn't have a phone before and they need one now. So
Okay.
this is like getting a ticket and the ticket's like, hey, can you configure this phone for the front desk down at the Texas site? Cool. And then boom. But I think I'm just gonna stick with this one, Chicago. I think it's a more specific one that I'm probably passing up, but this will do for right now.
And is this for a new physical device only, or let's say maybe Susan's taking over for someone else? The last person was fired, and we're giving her, I guess, maybe a new phone number, but it's the same IP phone, the physical one with the same MAC address. Would we be doing the same thing here, or would we just be updating the record?
We'll just be updating a record. So, for instance, if Susan got fired and Amy came in and sat at her desk like, well, this, I'm new, this my desk, or got moved over, then yeah, we would just change Susan's name out and put Amy's name in.
Okay.
Yeah, we probably, since, she's using the same phone, we don't really need to reprogram the phone, and she's going to be in the same location. As long as that phone is not moving, all we have to do is really just edit Susan's name out and put Amy,
Okay.
so yeah, that's pretty simple. Okay, so yeah, America, Chicago, date, time, format, month, day, year. Some locations do it different. Some countries do it different. They do it, the day first or the year first. So just always be mindful, especially if you're working outside of North America. Um, I would say outside of United States, because Canada is different. I've worked with Canada devices, and their format, I believe, is the day first. Um, I don't know. I think only United States uses month first. It's weird. But time format, 12 hour, 24 hour. 24 is more when you're working um like government contracts and stuff. I worked on a government project one time, and everything was like 24 hours. So it was like, oh yeah, 1300. And I'm just like, I don't know what that means, but cool. So just be mindful of these things. And you just save it, and you can go back and you'll see that your your date time group is there. Again, you can have different ones for different reasons. Um, let's see. The system, oh, you can do call manager groups. Now let's go back. Can I go back here? Now, call manager groups. This at step 7 is, right here is where you'll see our call manager groups. Our user, the phone, will register to the call manager, but we have groups of call manager that the phone can register to. Why? Main thing is redundancy. With redundancy, just not having a single point of failure, so we can have a backup, so we can continue. If one goes down, we have another one. We always want to think of redundancy when we are engineers, right? um, so we have our call manager, and we're adding configurations into our publisher, our call manager publisher. Our publisher is our main wheelhouse. This is where we add configs, we take configs away. We do everything here. It's the admin stuff. But our phones are going to register to our call manager subscriber. Our subscriber is where it's called call processing nodes. And this call processing node, it does just that. It only process calls. So we're not here to do admin stuff, to configure, take away, and troubleshoot. We're not here to do all that in the subscriber. We do all that on the publisher. The subscriber is only there to make a duplicate of the publisher so it can process the actual calls itself. It's actually doing that work. Why do we separate publisher and subscriber? Because having both together, having a call processing node plus doing configurations on a small environment, okay, cool. But in a big environment or a medium-sized to large environment, for instance, like T-Mobile or these oil companies or Vanguard, they need to separate that, because you need one server to just do what it needs to do, because we don't need it to process too much. We only want it to do one thing. If it starts multitasking, then a lot of things are going to start failing, right? If we are a big company, just like the ones I named, T-Mobile, Vanguard, then we'll probably need more than one processing node, more than one subscriber. We'll probably need a second subscriber or even a third subscriber. So our call manager group is a group of call processing nodes that our phone can register to. Because the first one may not work, and that's okay, stuff happens. The second one may not work, that's okay, stuff happens. But that third one better work. If it don't work, then something's going on with this phone, something's wrong with our configs on our call managers, something's going on. But again, we want to make sure that the phones have more than one server to register to because something may happen to one of the servers and we don't want a single point of failure. We don't want it to be like, oh, well, since this server got shot because of multiple things, then that's it. Nobody can make calls. Like, no, we want to be like, okay, all calls go to this server because that one went down, revert to boot back up, you know? And then also load balancing. You may hear that a lot. Load balancing is exactly what it is. It's balancing the load. So if you have 6,000 phones and 6,000 people, devices making calls at one time, but at a high area, probably like 9 or 10 a.m., those subscribers can balance those calls. So it'll take 3,000 for subscriber one and the other 3,000 for subscriber two instead of one subscriber handling 6,000 calls. It'll help it. So don't get overloaded. Calls won't drop because it's trying to go through, it's high, high availability time. So it's trying to go through the same wires or same transmission. And sometimes packets fail. I don't know if you guys ever went to a website and it's like, dang, this thing loading, and you refresh and then it pops up after like the second refresh. Yeah, some of your packets got dropped because a lot of people are either going to this site or on the internet or on your Wi-Fi network. So your package just wasn't the first one to get through. So you had to keep refreshing and retrying, resending packets to actually upload the website. Same thing here. The calls will drop. So it's worse. It's nothing we can refresh a website. But imagine, can you refresh a phone call? Imagine not hearing, hello, my name is Dave. Can I help you? Or whatever, hello, whatever. You just say, hello, Dave, can I help you? But all you hear is, can I help you? You're gonna be like, well, who is this? Can you say your name first? And they're like, oh, I did. I said my name was Dave. I said hello. But you didn't hear that because call audio packets got dropped. So again, it's worse if you don't hear a full sentence than the website. So back to it, just being redundant. So we're going to go to our call manager group to make sure we have some redundant servers. Now, just going to go to add new. We're going to name it. We can name it anything, our call manager group. We can call it, call manager group, CMG, call manager group, dash, I don't know, let's call it USA. Usually it's probably like 2 or 3, the only ones you can use, but this is lab, so they only gave us one. So this is available call managers, and this is selected call managers. We have none selected, we have one available. So what we have to do is select the one, push the down arrow so it can go into our selected area. Now, when you have more than one, you'll just do the same process, boop, boop, boop. Now, the order of operations matters. So if you have pub, sub, sub, then your phone is going to register to the pub first, which is publisher, and then to the sub, subscriber, and whatever else you have, first, second, third. So you would want to use these arrows to make it go up or down to, choose your orders. Which one would you like your phone to register first, second, third in this group? You would always change it to register sub first, your subscriber first. So your publisher will never be first in this list. It should be last in the list because you don't want your phones to uh to register to your publisher unless all the subscribers fail because the publisher is literally just here to put in config configurations and delete configurations. Okay. So when we're registering to make and receive calls, right? So really didn't have much here. We can just save it just for giggles here, and you can see it's been created. What's something else we can create? Oh, we can create call restrictions. Call restrictions are in the class of control. So you go to call routing, class of control, and we have calling search spaces and partitions. I believe we're going to let's do calling search spaces first. Let me see first how we should set this up because I did make a note one time. Oh, let's do partitions first. And we can do fine. And we see some partitions. So this partition in CSS, there are restrictions. Who can you call? Who can call you? Right? That's basically all it is. Now, this is like what confuses everybody. Partitions in CSS is like the easiest, hardest thing as an engineer, right? It's like takes you forever to get it, but once you get it, you got it. And if you don't use it, it's gone, right? Sometimes you learn so much about, the basics of this, which encompass CSS and partitions, but once you start learning, you start, moving up, doing different things in the department, and you go away from creating these little things, these basic configs. So it's easy to get these mixed up. Now, partition, what I like to kind of visualize it as is a partition is like a piece of paper with your name on, a piece of paper with your number on it. Okay. It's basically a file. I'm gonna keep it as a paper, And the calling search space is a folder. So you put the partition in a calling search space. The calling search space has a list of partitions. The folder, calling search space, CSS, the folder, if you open it, it has what? A whole bunch of papers, a whole bunch of files, a whole bunch of partitions. So a calling search space is a list of partitions. So the calling search space is the folder, the partitions is the papers in the folder. People will use so many different analogies. My mentor told me something like a file cabinet. The partition is like the files, and the CSS is the file cabinet, right? So you open up the drawer of the file cabinet, you go through the files, right? So you open up the CSS and you go through the partitions. Same ordeal, but that's kind of how you should visualize it. Okay? So a partition, it is it's applied to an exact number, right? This number says, who you can call. The CSS is usually applied to the device itself, not the line, not the number, and not the phone, the device, right? Or a gateway or a trunk, but not to a number, right? A partition is to a number. It's a dialable number. A CSS is applied to a device. So let's put it together. The CSS is applied to a device, let's say a phone. So that device will say, oh, you want to make and receive a call? Let's see if you can do that. So the CSS is going to go through its list of partitions to see if you can make international calls. And if you don't have an international partition, then you SOL, right? You get a busy tone or something. And then what? You'll probably create a ticket saying that, hey, I cannot make international calls. I get a busy tone. And then we will get that ticket as engineers and be like, hey, you're right, you do not. Do you have a business justification for why you want to call overseas? And then, they got to get something approved for their manager so we can give them a new config. Well, we can add the partition to their CSS or give them a new CSS that has international calling. But that's usually how that goes. We give them something basic, and if they need something more, then they let us know. But again, it's all based off of the user. Security and front desk, can call different places that the agent cannot call. Or maybe the sales agent can call everybody, but front desk and the security can't call everybody. They can only call internal, except for 911, because who do they need to talk to, right? That's not in this company. Again, it's different ways you can do these different restrictions. It's based off the company, however the company wants it. So don't get too crazy with the with coming up with different types of ways you can configure things, because the company again is going to tell you how to do it. You just need to know how to troubleshoot it, right? It's fun and games to create these naming schemes, but you need to learn how to troubleshoot. So if someone says they cannot make a call, you need to say, okay, well, any call, inbound call, outbound call, local call, certain numbers, certain area codes, internal, external. Do you even have a phone here? Some people will be like, oh, I tried to call, and it's like, you're not even in the system. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, how did your ticket even get through? So you got to just troubleshoot all the way down to that level, right? But okay, cool. So let's just click add new. Um, and as you can see, it will tell you how to create the partition, which is really the name of whatever. So if I wanted to create a partition for what's a regular partition? Oh, local, right? Local calling. I would probably do something like PT for partition dash local. I will probably do local dash Texas or TX, right? And I would save it. You can add more if you want. You can go with you can add a description, all this other stuff. But let's just save it. As you can see here, we have a partition. It's saved. It's PT, what we like to use as acronym for partition. Local, letting you know that this is a local partition for TX. And if you want to come in here and change the description, you can say local calling TX. Okay, you can save it. And you can go back and you will see local calling. Most of the time you'll see stuff like PT, you'll see LD, which stands for long distance dash TX. Okay. Now, if you, let's say this is a new site, TX is a new site that you're adding in these partitions and CSS for, you're just adding it in. You will have to do each one, which will be long distance calling, um, local, international, if that's approved. But most of the time you will add international, 911. You may add 4-digit dialing, so many different partitions, right? I think the main four is just local, long distance, international, and 911. I believe that's the regular. So if this is like your first time setting up this site, you will have to put in at least those main ones. And then, however, the company may have some other different customizable ones, whatever, they have access to or restrictions for. But again, you'll see local long distance for everything. Now, for the CSS, class of control, CSS, you can do find, and there's no CSS here. So you would add a new CSS, and let's say we would do CSS dash, let's just do Texas, right? We're going to say unrestricted. Is that how you spell that? Unrestricted access. So for this CSS that's called Texas, which we can even make it even more granular and say I don't know how to spell restricted. Unrestricted access, TX. So this means that it's going to combine all access, all Texas access. So we're going to do these global learned numbers and the directory numbers. They can call everybody and anybody. So this CSS, this folder, is going to contain all of the files, all of the numbers that we have available that's assigned. And we're going to call it unrestricted access. Okay. Now we may have one. Okay. Let's add one, and let's say this is CSS. Let's call it internal. That's usually one that we like. Internal TX. Okay. And internal, let's just say you can only call local. You can't even call long distance because we don't have any long distance. Or let's say we can call long distance and local because we got a couple offices in other states. But you can't call any of the E164 numbers, which is a regular North American number. It can only call a number that's long distance and that's local, but not just any old number. Okay? Any old number means that it's not one that comprises these partitions, right? So it may be international. It may be, I don't know, it may be something other than what these two are. And again, we can customize it different ways. Maybe we want a partition that's just for, I don't know, outbound calling, inbound calling, or a partition that's only for the front desk or the receptionist. Like we can get really, really granular. But regardless, you see we have our CSS. So we created our folders and we created our papers. Another thing I want to show you, which is not really part of this lesson here, but route patterns. Route patterns is the dialable digits that are assigned to the partition. So this right here is a great example of a route pattern. This means that you dial 9, and once you dial 9, you can dial any area code that starts between 2 and 9, which is usually any North America area code. It only starts between 2 and 9, and any old number, right? Any 7-digit number. That's usually associated with long distance. So let's do the PT long distance. So now, if this device has this partition LDTX, that means that it can dial this number scheme. If it's not this number scheme, they can't dial it unless they have a partition that matches the numbering scheme or the dialable digit scheme that they want to dial. So let's say they only have this partition, right? They only have the CSS. The CSS only has this one partition in it. This partition says that you can only dial this number or this dialable digits, the string, this way, this format. So if you decide to dial 911, you're not going to get to emergency services. It's going to get to a busy tone. Why? Because we said you must start off with 9 and then go between 2 or 9 and then finish off with the rest of the 9 digits. So 911 didn't fit in that scheme. That's why we have to create a route pattern for 911, because if somebody need emergency, they need to get to emergency services. Okay? So that's kind of gives you a little bit more on the partitions and how they're applied. Because you saw me just create PTLDTX. You're probably like, so who can dial PTLDTX? But we take this partition and apply it to a dialable digits format, to a string. That string could be 4-digit dialing. It can be 0, press 0, get you to the operator. It can be this long distance. It could be, local without the area code. It could be without the 9. Maybe, it could be a lot of things. The rabbit hole goes deep with this. So description, we can say, what we say? We said long distance. Okay. Presidents, we just put default is default. Route class, boys, whatever. I keep that default. That's doing too much. Gateway route list. We didn't go too far into that, and I don't want to take us down that. So let's just click whatever's here. Let me see. What else did I want to show you guys? Oh, discard digits. Ooh. So discard digits. So this 9 dot, it means pre-dot. It means that when the router gets this number, when it's time to route this number and send it out of our environment, the router, or we call it the gateway, needs to strip this 9, needs to strip whatever is before the dot, pre-dot. Whatever is before the dot, please, router, strip it, because it's not a real number. It's something for us to know. Why do we need to know 9 dot? 9 dot says this is how you get out of internal calling. So you may go to a hospital, or you may, I don't know, you may have been somewhere. You're like, hey, can I use your phone? And they give you the phone, and they say you got to press 9 to make to call outside, to make an external call, to call somebody that's not in the company. And you press 9, and then you can dial 404, boom, 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 boom. So that's why you don't have to use pre-dot, but we use it a lot to signify calls leaving our system, leaving our gateway, leaving our internal environment. So what we would have to do is discard digits pre-dot. So the call manager knows to say, hey, let me go ahead and strip this whatever is before the dot, so they can just send up the area code and the number. Okay? And then you save it. Oh, authorization code. This gets me a lot. Where's the authorization code at? Oh, we're not going to force it. So I should have showed you guys that error. That error was basically saying that you need to require this force code, basically to keep the phone or keep, something going on. We don't do that. We don't force it. We just click OK and click OK, and we create our route pattern. Why do you not force it? Again, it's something with using the defaults that call manager already comes pre-built. I don't know. That's more of an architect question. Don't get me the line. But we don't do anything with it. We just click OK. And that's something that I've been doing since day one in all my contracts, from T-Mobile to Vanguard to all the examples, all those companies I worked at. We all just click OK. So we might want to Google that if you really want the answer. But yes, as you can see, here's a pattern. When you go into a company, you will see probably at least 50, 100 patterns on the low end. And that's just, again, a whole bunch of different dialable strings that goes with different partitions. Because if we create a partition, this same pattern, long distance, but we want to go for Georgia, we might want to do a whole nother partition which says PD, LD, GA, and have it the same pattern. We'll have description long distance GA, and it'll probably be associated with a different device, a Georgia device. And if you have one company per each state, or at least, majority states, you're liable to do this like 40, 50 times. It can get crazy. And that's what I'm currently doing in my job. So I know how crazy it can get. Now let's go back to device pool because I think we set up everything we need to already. Now we can create our device pool. So we go into add new, our device pool. What do we want it to be? DP device pool. That's what we like to start with. You can name it whatever the company naming scheme is, but we'll say device pool Texas. Okay? Something simple. Um, I've seen it, just really be very long, like maybe a street name or maybe like Dallas, Texas, or I don't know. But keep it simple, keep it sweet. I don't know, you guys may heard me say KISS. KISS is something that we always just keep in mind as engineers. It's called Keep It Simple Stupid, right? And it's basically letting you know that when it's time to come up with something like a name or something in that sort, just keep it simple because the more complex you have it, the next person's gonna be like, what's going on? You know, um, we are here to increase our income, but some people are nerds and they be like, hey, let's name these device pools the Office characters, or let's name these device pools Harry Potter characters or Lord of the Rings, or like it's just so crazy, and you'll see craziness. But I want you to always you keep your stuff simple. I don't know if you guys are coders, but we want to make sure that we write clear code, understandable code. So, device pool name. Manager group, right? Call manager group. Let's do the one we created. Call manager USA. Auto registration, we don't really need all that. We can really just skip, honestly. Date and time group, we need that. Let's do Texas because we're making a Texas device pool. Our region, oh, let's do the Texas region because it is Texas. Now, we probably would have a media resource group list, but we're not there yet, so I don't want to get you guys any confusion. Location. Location doesn't have, an asterisk, but we still want to put something there. Hub none is the default. We probably should have created location. That's okay. But you would probably put a Texas location. And it's the same as regions. This has to deal with bandwidth as well, but it's the overall bandwidth. Regions is bandwidth per call. Uh, SRST reference. So SRST is site remote survivability test or something. Um, Basically, it's just letting you know that, hey, we're going to use another way to route this call in case this call manager go down. So if this publisher go down, the subscriber gonna go down and everything with it. So how would these calls route if our virtual machine just blacked out? Well, we have something that's called the PSTN, and we have a gateway that can literally um, transmit analog ones and zeros, just like the old days. We don't use old technology, we use new technology. We use audio or voice over IP, Internet Protocol. So we're not in the business of caring how voice goes over regular telephone lines. We're here to take voice and packetize it. Take this audio that I'm speaking and make it into ones and zeros so you can hear it and the next person can hear it, and all the way from Australia through the internet. That's our business. So again, if this call manager go down, if our business goes down, we can still make phone calls through regular old telephone poles. And usually we keep that disabled um, because we just do. Now, sometimes I do see, it come with different options, which is different gateways you can, choose. But we usually just disable that bad boy. Um, Connection, monitor duration. I forgot what that was for. I think that was more for when we was setting up something with call center agents. But we leave that blank. Single button barge. You can click a button, it'll do one thing. Keep that default. Join across lines, keep that default. What else has an asterisk? That's about it. Some of these, again, are good to change when you want to customize your settings. I'm not in the business of doing a whole bunch of customization, you know. Most of the time, the architect is the one to do all this. We as engineers, we can. It's helpful if we want to, up our salary, get a promotion maybe. Um, but you don't really need all this. And then you save. And then click on the reset button, changes to effect. Oh, apply. Oh, let me go back. There we go. So we have our device pool. It's been created. Now what we would do is we would go back to our phones, device, phones, click our front desk user, which is the only one here, and let's change our device pool because we don't want it default. We want it Texas because our front desk agent is in Texas. So we're going to save and told us to click apply to make the changes go in effect, but this is a lab environment, so. And then as you can see, we have our 7911 with our MAC, with our description, it's the front desk, with our device pool in Texas. So we can kind of see here that maybe this front desk is in Texas, right? This is called discovery because as great as it sounds for you to hop on to a new company and they just show you around their environment and tell you everything, that's in a perfect world. Most of the time, you just jump in there and they be like, hey, I assigned a ticket to you. It's something simple. It's just adding in a device into call manager. Nothing crazy. And then you be like, okay. And then when you go to do it, this is what you have to do. And you be like, oh, nothing crazy. But I just had to create a whole device pool. Like I just had to do a whole bunch of stuff. But sometimes that come with it, but they expect you as an engineer to know this at a minimum. This is basic stuff. We didn't even get into inbound calling or outbound calling. This is just adding a device at a minimum. Okay. So when you do that, you have to discover, you have to be like, okay, well, I see device pools here and I see DPTX, DPGA, DPVA, DPMA. Those sound like states, you know? And when you click on the device pool, look at the device pool. You can click on it. And if somebody did really good, like taking notes or configuring, they'll have certain things here. So you'll see like, oh, well, TX Central, that looks like Texas. Now, which has tripped me up, which has been crazy, is usually I can see these things. We can kind of know. Something says VA Eastern, we kind of can tell. Virginia, right? But since I've been working with international sites, it's been, different with date and time or the device pool. It may say something like ABZ. And I'm like, what the hell is ABZ? And then it says Europe as the date and time group. So I'm like, okay, okay, that's a Europe site. But then we may have something like KAZ device pool and it's in Europe too. So now I'm like, okay, is this ABZ? Is that a different like city or something? Or is that a country? Like what is ABZ? What is KAZ? You know? Um, but yeah, they're like cities, you know. KAZ is Kazan, and ABZ is something to do with Aberdeen. I don't know why they got the Z in there, but I don't know if you heard of Aberdeen, Scotland. But yeah, so I've been learning. I've been learning geography, working my voice network jobs. Um, so yeah, that was the phone, that was the call manager, device pool, groups. Okay, yeah. That was really it that I wanted to show you guys. Um, I just wanted to keep it, really simple because this thing is a rabbit hole, right? Um, it's up front. This seems pretty easy, right? It's not much going into a CLI line. It's not really much of that. It's, as you can see, add new, name this, save, click here, drop down. Pretty, pretty simple. I think the hardest part is the troubleshooting. That's why if you can troubleshoot, they'll teach you how to add certain stuff in. But you kind of don't know how to troubleshoot unless you do know how to add stuff in. Like, it's kind of like goes back in a full circle. But troubleshooting is what I've learned in this industry is you kind of have to work backwards. You kind of have to take the test, pass the test, and then take the classes, start the study guide. Even though you've already passed the exam, you kind of got to go back to, you know, the classes, the remedial classes, kind of. And what that do and why that's good is because I feel like companies want problem solvers. Companies want people who's going to go and get the job done. Regardless, you may have never seen this job before, but are you willing to research and try to resolve it, right? You got resources at hand. You got technical assistance by Cisco, which the company pays for. You got your architect. You got, at least 3 to 4 other voice engineers. Um, and you collaborate with them. You got security department, you got the network engineers, collab and figure out why this site cannot make or receive calls, or this site cannot make calls, or whatever the case may be. Um, really quick, just to show you guys. I don't know, can I go back? Oh no. Just to show you guys. Oh, maybe I can't come all the way here. But I want to show you basically the 3 things that you really should be studying if you want to. Let me copy link. If you want to be in this field. Um, because things change, call managers update, configurations don't change too much, but certain protocols as far as like how people do things, how companies do things change with the times and just between company and company. So, excuse me, it's really good to understand our IP phone boot up, what we just did, which is adding a device in Call Manager. It's really good to understand inbound calling, how a call comes into uh the front desk phone, right? We have somebody random calling through our telephone line into our router, and the router is going to packetize that audio because our telephone network is just regular audio. It's just sending those frequencies, those wavelengths. Once it hit our gateway, our router's like, whoa, what's these wavelengths? Let me digitize them and make them into ones and zeros. Once our router makes it in the wavelengths, the frequencies, once they change the frequencies into ones and zeros, it will send it over to our call manager, which is our virtual machine in the cloud. Our call manager says, oh, I know ones and zeros. Let me go ahead and decode this into this, right? Something very simple because this is for us. This right here, our devices, this little interface is called a GUI, a graphical user interface. Why are we working on a GUI? Because it's prettier for us. It's easier for us to understand. We're humans. We're not computers, right? Computers go by the CLI line. So people who can work the CLI, they're like, people love them. Companies love them. They get paid the big bucks. Why? Because again, Who wants to read in the CLI? It's a lot. It's just a black screen with a whole bunch of ones and zeros and numbers and letters. So if you can decode that and read that, you big money. Most of the time, they don't do that. They just do this. So definitely make sure you understand how a call comes into our gateway, packetized, goes to our call manager, and our call manager sends the call to the front desk, and the front desk able to use it and do whatever it needs to do. You got to understand that flow. And the last flow is outbound calling. Make sure you know how the front desk can make an outbound call. Okay? When they pick up that phone and they start dialing, call manager is like, okay, is this in your CSS? Is this a list of your part? Do you have these digits that you can dial to? You know? And then Commerce like, okay, they can dial it. And then it sends to the gateway, which sends to our telephone network, and the telephone network sends it out to whoever they was dialing. Okay. Now this cloud, this PSTN, our telephone network cloud, can also be what we call our internet service provider. But more on the I think it's internet telephony service provider, ITSP. So instead of PSTN, you may hear ITSP, which is an internet telephony service provider. That means that this provider specializes in sending calls over the internet. Because as a voice network engineer, you may just work for a bank. You may work for a hospital. You may work for a logistics company. So you're not the one providing yourself service. Like you're renting out service. You working, let's say you work for a logistics company. That logistics company has to call AT&T and say, "Hey, I got 50,000 employees and I need voice service," right? Or you may work for AT&T as a network engineer, and you may provide that service. Your clients may be T-Mobile, or better example, your clients may be a logistic company or a hospital that you're like, okay, this is who we provide service to. This is who we help. And that's a whole nother ball game. But just know that um, you as an engineer can work for multiple different types of companies. Those companies most likely do not specialize in telephony or voice service. I've only worked for T-Mobile, which was a telecommunications company. Everybody else has been in a different industry. So it's T-Mobile was different than any other industry because every other industry is like, hey, we don't specialize in telecommunications. We specialize in food, or we specialize in helping people in hospitals or something. So I don't know this whole service thing. So just keep that in mind, that your perspective on the network may be different based on the job, based on the company that you work for. Um, but outbound calling, inbound calling, and boot up. So let's say front desk, hey, I cannot make a call. I cannot well, they'll say something so vague like, hey, my calls don't work. My phone don't work. And you'll be like, okay, your phone doesn't work. So doesn't power on? And be like, no, the calling, I get a busy tone. Okay, so when you make a call, you get a busy tone, or when someone calls your phone, it's a busy tone? Oh, when I make a call, maybe when someone calls me, but I know when I tried to call somebody, it said busy. Okay, let's recreate the problem. So you'll have them recreate the problem. What phone number are you dialing? So one, you already know if they're dialing a wrong number, wrong scheme. Okay, let's say it's the right scheme and they dial out and it's busy. So what I would do as the engineer, I would place a call to the front desk, whether from my mobile, from my work phone, or from someone else around them, maybe a coworker. Hey, can y'all call the front desk and see what you get? Do you get the operator? Do you get, ringing? So that will let me know, is this an issue with just outbound calling or inbound calling? And then I can start troubleshooting. So I would first make sure, like, okay, everything's good. I see their device, I see the Mac, they got a good device pool. I will come in here. Let me see their phone. They said they can't. Okay, well, one, the phone ain't registered, so automatically that's why you can't make calls. But let's use our imagination. Let's say it is registered. Everything's good. Okay, so we are registered. So I would come back. Everything is registered. That means that all of this is good. It has did its 7, so we're good on IP phone boot up. They say when people call them, it's okay. But when they call out, it's not okay. They get a busy tone. So we will come into our outbound calling. We'll say when they call, it gets busy. So we need to see, where is the call failing? Is call manager not processing this call? Or is the gateway not processing this call? And if both of these are processing the call, if in the cloud is having an issue, that means we got to call whoever we rent service from, because they're the issue. But most of the time it's in our environment, because our provider tells us ahead of time if they're going to do a planned outage, or if something happened and we're affected, right? We'll get a blast, an email blast. But we didn't. So let's not jump to the conclusions, and let's think that it's something in our environment. So we would look, there's multiple tools that we have to determine this call flow. Is the call failing in call manager or the gateway? We can log into the gateway first and run a command and say, okay, front desk, I want you to try to make a call. So let me see if the gateway catches it. Front desk makes a call. We look on the gateway, CLI line. We'll look in the gateway and don't see a call. So therefore, we don't see anything coming to here. So that means that it must stop at the call manager, because the gateway don't even have it. And the only way for the gateway to have it is for the call manager to pass it to the gateway. So now all these settings, I got to look and see what's going on. I got to go to the route patterns and be like, okay, is the partition good? Is the pre-dot good? Is there supposed to be a pre-dot? Okay, let me look in the route list. Let me look in the gateways. Let me look in the call manager groups. Maybe the call manager groups tow up the trunks. Maybe the SIP trunk, maybe the SIP trunk, the logical path from call manager to the gateway is messed up. Maybe the IP is wrong. I got to check all of these. If all of these are right, call manager has another tool that will tell you if your configs are logically right, right? Theoretically right. Are they really, should they be that? Maybe, maybe not. But they'll tell you based off their system defaults if your configs are good or not. So you can run that. It's called DNA, Cisco Digital Number Analyzer, or something like that. Digit number analyzer. And they'll tell you like, maybe that's not going, that not going. Now let's say you checked all these look good, and it's still not, the call still not getting to the gateway. So what you can do, you can take the phone of the call manager like this, and you can like literally either copy it. Where's the copy? Oh, you can do copy, super copy, or copy, which just literally makes another instance of this, and test that out to see maybe the phone is actually the issue, or maybe it's something different. Or you can come in and let's say change, I don't know, maybe a device pool, maybe a partition or a CSS, but you would change one of these main devices, main configs, to another, just to see if it's something with the actual main configuration, the basic configurations, which is really the device pool. Let me see, let me come in here. The device pool. Oh, yes, the device pool and this line. the partition for this line. It may be something else. Let's click on it. It may not be global learned E164. It may have to be long distance Texas, you know? And then you save that bad boy, and now they can make outbound calls. It'd be as simple as that sometimes, which is terrible. But yeah, or it could be um where we at? The calling search space, right? You may have to actually put unrestricted access for Texas and save it, because sometimes you do so many configs, you forget to add the CSS on the device because it doesn't have an asterisk, so you ain't paying attention. But you're gonna pay attention when you get that ticket that the person you added cannot make or receive calls. So usually that usually is a fix, believe it or not. My current position, I've been in it for probably about like 8 months, 6, 7 months now. And all the issues that come to me about calling, it's usually a device pool, a CSS, or partition. It's usually nothing crazy like regions, locations, nothing like, it's usually these. I don't know. But that's usually it. Um, and again, like I said, just knowing these three will be able to, you know, get you out of a lot of, will let you come to a resolution or solution more quickly than just going through what all, oh, I know all these exam topics. I know how to do this and do that. No, you need to know how an IP phone boots up, how inbound calling works, and how outbound calling works. And that will always get you a 100K salary. It has got me a 100K salary. So I don't see why I wouldn't for you. And I have a CCNA, which means that a CCNA does not involve any of this that I just taught you. I learned this on the job. So CCNA just gives you foundational, because without the CCNA, you wouldn't know what a gateway is. You wouldn't know the need for a switch. You wouldn't know why a switch in a router is important. You wouldn't know why DHCP is in this diagram, or TFTP. You wouldn't even know what these acronyms mean. You know, you wouldn't know about VLANs. And these are the things you must know as a voice network engineer, because this is the foundation of setting up everything. So if you don't even know the foundation, then how are you going to, again, troubleshoot, fix issues? So that was, oh, and another thing, because I actually ran into this probably last month. I was migrating a phone from one call manager to another call manager, and I did all the configs right. I created the device pool. Basically, everything that I showed you, that's all I had to do was create the device pool, put the MAC in. And the phone just was saying registration rejected. It was not registering to the call manager. And I did all the research I could, but I found out that the reason why it was not registering to the call manager is because on the phone itself, the configs, the settings, it had a TFTP IP address that was different than what I was migrating to. So I had to walk the technician, because I'm remote, I don't go to the office, but I had to walk the technician through on how to delete the TFTP IP address from the phone, and then add in the new one, and then reboot the phone. And then once the phone reboot, it did its one. Okay. Well, it did its two. The phone got power. It did its three. It went through the switch to get on the VLAN. It did its four, which is, it went to the router to four. To five, it went to DHCP and said, oh, this is my IP address. This is my default gateway. And this is my TFTP server that I go to. And then it went to the correct TFTP server to say, oh, you want me to go to this call manager. And then it went to the call manager. that's specified. So sometimes it's not even your configs. It's you knowing that the phone needs a TFTP address. What is TFTP for? It's for the phone configurations. It's the phone firmware, and the phone, where it should go next after it hits the TFTP server. All the files. So you say, oh, this phone is downloading certain security files, certain, again, firmware update, software upgrades, whatever. It does that by the TFTP server, not by the call manager. So if you don't know networking, like the CCNA networking, then you wouldn't know that. And then you would be troubleshooting until the wheels fall off. And believe it or not, a lot of voice engineers do not know networking. I was able to negotiate my salary because I did know networking. So take that for what it is. But I want you guys to be, if you do decide this path, be the best voice engineers out here. So you should definitely know networking and voice so you can be dual and you can get that money, you know? If you only know basics, you only get paid the basics. So I hope this was informative. I'm going to chop it up, definitely do a little bit of edit so it's not this long, and then I will upload it and make sure I post it for you guys. But before we get out of here, do anybody have any questions, comments, concerns, even if it's on CCNA or anything?
I definitely appreciate it. This was really good. It's starting to make a lot more sense now.
Great, great. Now that's good. It's always going to come full circle, so just know that you're going to pout on information. Some things may correlate, but it probably will take, maybe a whole year before you be like, "Oh."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm here for it. And I enjoyed the full presentation. So if you are willing to send the full one without editing it, I would definitely appreciate it because
Oh,
everything you was really good.
oh, well, for sure, for sure. I will definitely send you that full edit. Yeah, I think it was pretty cool. I think I'll just chop off the little first part that I was, pulling up my systems, and then probably this little last part of just talking, um, like right now. So yeah, for sure, I can definitely send the full to you. Let me see. Also, I'm glad you brought that up because I have a UCCX lab
Mm.
for tomorrow. If you want to join,
Okay,
um,
yeah.
yeah, I was gonna play around. It's been a minute since I've been in UCCX, but um, I want to at least play around with it, do some scripting, see if I can pull up finesse, and just try to show you at least how call centers are ran from this point.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Perfect. I can use that as an example in my
definitely.
interview.
Oh yes, for sure, for sure. Contact
That
center is a lot, but
mhm.
this should give you something.
Okay.
Oh, all right. Nothing from you guys. Let me see who's here. Oh, we got Ashley, Miss Berry.
How you doing? I just want to say thank you. I'm currently studying for the CCNA now, so um, yeah, I haven't really looked into voice in engineering, but this was a good like start off or an example, so I appreciate it.